This is part 3 of the tutorial on launching an EC2 instance that dynamically registers with a Control-M environment. In the first part, we covered building an AMI. In the second part, we saw how to launch EC2 instances using that AMI. And in this part, we will examine how the dynamic registration is performed via this RC script that you see in front of you. Please note, this script is based on the standard RC script called rc.agent_user supplied with the standard Control-M agent installation, and it's just one example of how to accomplish this dynamic registration process. Line 19 uses a standard AWS facility available on every EC2 instance to retrieve the instance ID of that machine. We then see in lines 22 through 24 using the AWS CLI to retrieve information from the instance tags as we described in the second part of our tutorial. To repeat quickly, the environment defines the Control-M environment you want to connect to, and this is the RESTful endpoint that in effect represents the enterprise manager. CTM server is the name of the Control-M server that this agent will connect to, and CTM host group is the name of the Control-M host group that this instance will join. Again, keep in mind that these EC2 instances are dynamic and can come and go. You never want to bind jobs to these machines. Instead, using this instance tag, specify a host group, and when this machine initializes, it will join this host group together with any other agents that may be available in this host group and run whatever workload is queued up and waiting. As machines come and go, this work will run on different machines as is appropriate. Lines 29 and 30 retrieve the definition and the credentials for this environment. We'll see momentarily how we can create these files. In this demo, we are storing them in a public S3 bucket. Obviously, you would want to store your credentials in a secure location that would also be accessible to these EC2 instances as they start up. Lines 58 and 59 build an alias or a logical name for our Control-M agent on this instance. It is going to be a combination, as we saw in part 2, of the instance's host name and its instance ID. We'll see in a later tutorial how this information is used to clean up our environment if an instance terminates. Once we have this information, we then check to ensure that this is the first time this instance is starting, and if that is the case, we then use the CTM CLI to provision set up this agent. If you recall, we described that provision breaks down the installation process into two components. One is the install of the agent, and the second part is the configuration. Setup is that configuration. Using the name of the Control-M server and the logical agent name, we then connect our new instance to the default environment defined in the files that we have retrieved from the S3 bucket. We then finish by adding this agent in line 70 to the desired host group. Keep in mind, the name of the environment is not specified here explicitly because it is the default in the credentials that we have retrieved in lines 29 and 30. The rest of this RC file then goes on to perform the standard functions intended for this RC script by starting the Control-M agent if it's appropriate to do so. Let's quickly take a look at how we can create these credential files that we refer to in the RC script. On any machine where the CTM CLI is installed, you can use the environment function to build and manipulate environment definitions. Here we can see that we have a couple defined, including one called CTM prod, and most importantly, that CTM prod is our default. That means that any request via the CTM CLI will be sent to the CTM prod environment. And just as a quick refresher, note that in the RC script, we do not specify an environment, which means that the default will be used. Once we've created this environment, it is stored in the .ctm directory for this user. And specifically, the env files .json and .key are the two files that we need. So we can simply copy them and store them in any location that is secure and accessible to these EC2 instances as they start up. Again, in the demo environment, I'm using an S3 bucket, but you can use whatever location makes sense in your organization. Simply copy these two files, giving them the name of the environment that you want to designate. If we then look at the RC script in lines 29 and 30, we retrieve those files and store them in our current agent installation as env.json and env.key. If you have multiple control M environments, you can then build the definitions for each one of them. It's recommended that each file contain only the environment that you wish so that you do not proliferate user and password information in many files. But really, the key element that you have to keep in mind is that as long as the default is the environment that you want, that will be the environment that will receive the requests being sent from the RC script.